And he said, we love Salomon, and your product is great, but that ad campaign that you guys have launched, we hate it, and you need to stop it, or we're basically not going to do business with you anymore.
This is My Best Campaign. I'm Amanda Lee Smith. I was one of those kids in the 1990s who spent my $3 an hour babysitting money, yes, that is a real number, on issues of Trans World magazine and plastered my bedroom with my favorite snow and skateboarding ads. And honestly, I miss that golden era of edgy, boundary-pushing creative, and I miss print advertising. So talking to Niclas Bornling about his days at Salomon in Sweden and France dropped me right into sweet, sweet nostalgia. But more importantly, it was a little wake-up call about having courage to push boundaries and stop letting the algorithms dictate our creative campaigns. Niclas was at Salomon during a total revolution in skiing that happened in the late 1990s and for another 15 years after that. And his team took some really bold risks that at a different brand could have been career-ending. In fact, they were so bold that Intersport, which was Salomon's biggest retailer at the time, asked them to pull their ads or lose the business. Niclas was also at Salomon during a super pivotal brand reset that just might be responsible for some of the brand's huge success today. He went on to VP marketing roles at some Gorp core favorites like Keen and Houdini, and he also put in a few years each at Black Diamond and at New Era. In this episode, we got a little existential about the state of creativity today and sentimental about our younger selves and the foolishness it takes to do something actually groundbreaking in advertising. I loved the stories Niclas tells in this episode, and I think you will too. If there's one thing I've learned about you, it's that you are absolutely a storyteller. I mean, we met, I think, for the first time in Austin and sat and had dinner, and you just told amazing tales. And I want to give you lots of space to dive in and specifically hear stories about the really incredible campaigns at Salomon and one in particular that launched your career. But before we dive in, you're in a really interesting role right now. You're CMO at Shibumi Shade, and I think folks that live on the East Coast of the US have probably seen this on every single beach. West Coast maybe less known, but the brand has had major growth even in what feels like kind of a challenging market. And this is like a premium product. We're talking like $200 or $300 for what's essentially a sunshade. What do you think is happening? What do you think you and the team at Shibumi have done that have really helped you kind of buck this downturn that so many brands are experiencing?
Well, as always, I've been with the company for about a year now, and so I'm still new and young and fresh to this whole space. And the story of this company is as humble as many of the people that I've met from North Carolina, where the company is from originally, too. And it's extremely authentic. And in fact, it was never really meant to be a business. And that's one of the things that drew me in, was the honesty in that. Like we didn't set out to be entrepreneurs, two brothers and their best friends. We set out to make our own beach experience better for us and our family. So we tinkered and hammered and went to the Ace Hardware store, and then they got inspired by things that they saw on the beach in North Carolina, Emerald Isle, and all of a sudden one day they had figured this really cool thing out, which is a shade that actually works with the wind rather than against it. And you take any other sunshade, it's somehow going to be fighting the wind, right? You see these images of umbrellas just flying down and tumbling down and impaling people on beaches. It's crazy, but it actually happens a lot more than you think.
Dangerous world.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's some crazy statistics that beach umbrellas kills more people on the beaches in the US than sharks do. A lot of people get injured, at least. And this thing, it was just like this beautiful, elegant solution to not fighting the wind at all, but actually utilizing the wind as a factor. And that really drew me in because I'm a sailor and I grew up on the ocean, and, utilizing nature's own power, wind, has always been true and honest to me. And when I saw this thing on images, as you say, like the southeast of the US, you cannot go to a beach without seeing this blue and teal shades flowing in the air. And it's grown very, very fast. And now it's like, if you don't have one and turn up on one of the beaches during summer in the southeast, you're going to be like one of those guys that didn't understand or didn't get it at all. And it really drew me in. So to your question, like, so what have we done? Well, I'm a custodian of an absolutely amazing innovation of two brothers and their best friends, hard work that grew organically without really any marketing at all. And at least not the kind of marketing that most people think about nowadays. You speak about paid media and digital marketing. Like, there was none of those things at all. But what they did is they spent every hour that they could on the beach talking to people, showing them the product, letting them try the product. And if they bought it, they would contact them and say, can we help you in any way? Can we assist you? Do you have a problem? Whatever it is, like, we're here to help you. So people became real fans of the company and the brand. And I spent some time in North Carolina on one of the beaches this summer, and I met people. And when I told them that I worked for Shibumi, it was like, wow, really? I met one of the founders once 5 years ago. And I started realizing that this is probably more about not screwing something up rather than repositioning or changing or anything like that. It was taking care of the existing equity that was there in a market devoid of any brands, really. I mean, there are no strong brands in beach culture, and here comes Shibumi and says you should pay $285 for a shade, and people go, yeah. It's a brand in a space of cheap stuff, basically. And that's what the company is doing differently and better than anybody else.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is, first of all, like, real authenticity. This was solving a problem that they were feeling, and so they went out to solve it for themselves. It sounds like it's an incredible product, and they went where the audience is. What do you do to then amplify that foundation?
Telling stories about the company, about the product, and about the founders. I mean, at the end of the day, I firmly believe that whenever I've been, involved in anything successful in my professional career, it's always been founded in an incredibly strong story. And I think that at the end of the day, you can pay yourself to short-term revenue, but you won't build a long-term brand that way. So I think what we're trying to do at Shibumi in general in the marketing department is to tell really amazing stories that resonate meaningfully with our audience of people out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know you because I know your wife, and because I live part-time in the same city as you, which is Portland. And so I know that you are not an East Coast guy. Maybe you're not even a beach guy, and you've spent most of your career in more like core outdoor brands. But I think the sign of a great marketer is the ability to speak to an audience that might be really different from the world that you've always lived in. So when you think about Shibumi, how do you approach that problem of it really not being you that's the audience?
Yeah, no, it's true. I'm not even American, actually. I'm from Sweden originally, and yes, there are some strips of beach in Sweden, but that's not exactly what you think about when you think about Sweden. So that is a new space to me, although I'm a sailor, so I've obviously grown up on the water and all that stuff. But I mean, one of the things that drew me to Shibumi was the fact that I had never, ever been in this space. I was not the audience. Having worked for a long time at Salomon, 15 years, and, which we'll talk about soon, Black Diamond Equipment in Salt Lake City, at New Era Cap in Buffalo, and a couple of other brands, which have all been very close to who I am personally. I think I was quite honestly getting a little tired of telling stories and doing marketing to people like me and myself and like-minded people. which, by the way, I think is something that has been and may still be an industry problem in the outdoor world, actually, that it pulls in a lot of passionate people, and you start actually thinking that the growth opportunity is you yourself and the so-called core. And that's the reason why a lot of the brands in the outdoor industry today find themselves where they are, because the growth is not coming from the core anymore and hasn't been for quite a while. So what drew me into Shibumi was the fact that I was not going to do marketing. I was not going to market to myself, my people, and my clan. I was going to do marketing to people that I don't personally have a relationship to. And I think that's the true mark. That's the true test of marketing, because to me, it always starts with putting the audience right in the bullseye in the center, which means I have to understand them, which you can gain from conducting, formal consumer insights, from buying research studies and stuff like that. Or you can gather that insight by observing, looking, and learning all you can about the audience that you're putting right to both sides of your brand and your business. And that, to me, was really exciting and interesting. And after a year, remains the one big thing that keeps me sort of waking up in the morning excited. What more can I learn about our audience? What's happening in culture? And they are different and really cool to understand that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'd be pretty excited to set myself up on a beach and collect user data from there. Not a bad place.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're going to cool beaches, amazing beaches, and walk around beaches and talk to people and look, observe, and learn.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about a time in your life when you absolutely were speaking to yourself. Let's talk about Salomon, where you, as you mentioned, spent 15 years. Take us back to the original moment. I think it was the 1990s. You're in Sweden. Salomon was kind of like the king of skiing, but there was a real shift happening. So what was happening with the brand, and what was happening in the world of skiing at that moment?
Everything happened. I think that the world of skiing stand to thank everything that happened at the end of the 90s, basically. I mean, I had grown up on skis like lots of Swedes had, and I followed this alpine ski racer, Ingmar Stenmark, who won like 86 World Cup victories. And in school, I remember like in middle school, they would roll in TV sets. I don't know if you had that, Amanda, when you grew up, but they would, these huge TV sets that would be like standing on a stand with little wheels underneath it, and they would roll that in, and then they would stop classes and say, okay, it's the first run or it's the second run, and Ingmar is in second, and Phil Mayer and Steve Mayer from the US are coming up behind, and all of Sweden would stop. And it was like, you went to school, you had either one of two backpack brands. You had a Fjällräven backpack, and if you wore that meant where you stood politically, and you would be an environmentalist or a tree hugger, whatever the thing would be, or you would have a Salomon backpack. And then, that meant that you were like into alpine skiing, and it, you were close to that audience. So I grew up under that one. After I graduated college, I really didn't know, what I was going to do. And then I was very lucky. I've been really lucky, Amanda, in my career, in my life in general. I always say that I've been slipping on, pieces of banana peel and really like just landing somewhere, but taking advantage of that one. And I did this time. A hiring recruiter called me and said, there is a position for a company called Salomon. Have you ever heard of them? And I was like, are you kidding me? Yes, of course. I've got Salomon ski boots and bindings and all that stuff. Yeah. And it's for a marketing manager role. And I couldn't believe it. Like I didn't even understand that there could be such a job existing. Like, out of business school and college, I thought I'd have to go some boring, traditional conservative finance or economy path. But I wasn't really interested in that. I was interested in brands, and I had become through college. And that meant I could combine my personal passion with an actual career. So I came into Salomon in 1998. I think the three most important years in skiing, I mean, over the last 50 years at least, were probably somewhere 97, 98, 99. I mean, I was like everybody else that was young at the time. I didn't want anything to do with skiing. Like, that's what my dad did. I wanted to be on a snowboard. That was the cool
I had
shit.
sold my skis ages ago. That was like prime snowboarding time.
Heck yeah. I mean, that was, already from the 80s, quite frankly, to be honest with you. Snowboarding had already come in and challenged the norms. And it was, not just from you were standing sideways versus standing frontways. It was a culture. It was an expression. It was youth. It had all those hallmarks of a revolution happening. And Salomon had actually launched snowboard a little earlier, I think potentially back in 97 or something like that, and wanted a piece of that market. So when I started working at Salomon, I was still snowboarding. And I kept snowboarding for quite a while, actually. But I started looking at like what was happening. And at the time, there was this Canadian crew of people that called themselves the Canadian Air Force. It was a guy, Mike Douglas, who today remains, I think, one of the most influential individuals on the ski industry overall. It was a guy called J.P. Auclair, rest his memory. It was Jeff Cusson and a couple of other guys. And they had started going to snowboard parks or snow parks and wanted to ski. They were mogul skiers. And at the time, mogul ski was very conservative and they weren't allowed to do the tricks that they wanted to do. So like, okay, we'll take our game to a snow park instead. And I think snowboarders were looking a little sideways on them. But, after a while, seeing what these guys were doing on skis, like, okay, we kind of respect you. You're okay. You can be in our park. And the thing was that they didn't really have the skis that they needed to do what they were doing. And Mike Douglas specifically took it on himself to talk to every single ski brand at the time. And he got no's. It was just no after no. That's for snowboarding. That, we don't need to make a pair of twin tip skis. Our market is all about, alpine ski racing and, long, hard, difficult skis. And Mike was like, but I'm telling you, this thing is going to change things. It's going to change the world. You have to be on this. And he got really lucky because he was somehow put in contact with Toshi, who was running Salomon Japan. Salomon Japan was extremely progressive and did things very differently, much faster than anybody else, including HQ in France. And he said, well, I'll make sure that I'll make you and your crew some twin tip skis, and we're going to call it the 1080 ski. So that the ski was first actually developed for the Japanese market, but utilized by the Canadian Air Force. And they came to market, and now everybody wanted these skis. They were yellow, they had the logo, and they looked completely different from a boring traditional ski racing ski. And Mike and his crew, thankfully saved probably skiing to much degree, because it pulled young people back into the fold again that had abandoned skis and went to snowboarding. And so sort of at the same time, that started to challenge the norms of what did it mean to be a skier? Because the only inspiration you'd have would be the ski racers, basically, which was very much driven by Austria and Switzerland and parts of Italy and the traditional hardcore ski racing markets. That was what you were looking to. But younger people wanted to ski differently, wanted to express themselves, and the idea of free skiing started to develop at the time. And Salomon had jumped on that one and developed another new ski that came to be one of the best-selling skis of all time, called the Extreme Ski. And that was launched right about the time that I started at Salomon. So I came in, I was young, I was absolutely fearless, I was dumb, I was ignorant, I had all the hallmarks of somebody that could actually make a difference just because of my ignorance. And I was looking, we're going to start talking, and at the time there was no digital marketing, right? It was still in the print area. It was still sports marketing and event marketing and the traditional buckets that existed at the time. And I was like, we're gonna have to advertise these new skis. And I looked at so you would be given basically by HQ it was called an info kit, and on that info kit there was like a DVD that was sent out, and there you had all the print ads, and then you had like the tech specs, and then you had the training guides and all that kind of stuff. And I was looking at the DVD and I was looking at the advertising, and I was like, I don't get it. Like, why are we like, so we've got a revolution in skiing. It is now way more fun to ski than it's ever been before. It's way more accessible to a lot of people that have found skiing very difficult because of the shape of the ski and the length of the ski. And it was all race skis, right? Who could ski on that? And here came skis that were fun. And they looked better too. And we kept on in the industry talking about features. What's the material that the ski was built on? Was it titanium or was it carbon fiber? Or we talked about millimeters here and there, and all kinds of things that just didn't mean anything whatsoever. It didn't give anybody a reason to buy the ski. So I went to my boss, who had the audacity, he had the courage to hire me once. A dear friend of mine, Krilla Lidgren, Krister, who became, he probably doesn't know this, but he was definitely my mentor. And I said, we got to do something different, Krilla. We got to talk about the benefit of what's happening to ski shapes, to ski construction. And the benefit is that it's fun to ski. And that's what we're going to talk about. And it's like, heck yeah, let's do something like that. And so I took my brief to a little startup creative agency in Gothenburg, Sweden. And I said, guys, we got to do this differently. And they came back and pitched an idea. And I was like, oh my God, okay, this is what I'm talking about. This is crazy. And the idea was that we were going to quite literally kill off all the old remnants of ski design and the ski industry. And then we're going to give new birth to a new generation that was coming up behind it. And then we're going to make fun of all the institutions that were in place. And I was like, okay, I like it. And I'm sure it's going to be a lot of people raising their eyebrows, but we got to do something like this. And so we set out to create this series of ads, and the very first ad was a scene. I mean, so imagine this scene, right? It's your typical house that was built in the 20s or the 30s. It's a high rise, 5-6 stories high, flat apartments in it, and then there would be an attic on top. And then in the attic was, this little booth places where you store your personal belongings if you have a small apartment. So wooden beams and kind of like little light that trickles through here and there, but not very clear what's happening up in the attic. And in that scene, we had taken a pair of skis. It was clearly visible that it was K2 skis, by the way. We just kind of eliminated the K2 logo, but we kept that long stripe, red, blue throughout. So if you were in the know, you knew that it was K2. However, you couldn't really prove it. And the ski had quite literally hung itself, committed suicide in the attic. With the hangman's knot hanging around sort of what's supposed to be the radius of a new pair of skis, at least. Those skis were dead straight, so I'm not really sure how it hung on. But anyway, you get the picture, the hangman's knot, and then a little stool that had been sort of kicked over, right? And then it hung itself there. And then it had left this farewell note that was handwritten by the ski that we had sort of then inserted into the ad creative, and it read something like, "My dear, I have decided to leave this world because you obviously don't think I'm any fun and interesting any longer, and you've fallen in love with these new young skis that are so easy to ski on and fun and yada." the typical fair wear leather, very bitter. And then we put this ad into the first edition of the big ski magazine in Sweden. And people started calling. Most people are like, wow, this is fun. Finally, somebody is doing something different. Finally, somebody's talking to the actual benefit of this new ski. But I said to Krilla, like, there's probably going to be a little bit of, thankfully we didn't really have social media at the time, because the amount of hate we would have gotten would have probably discouraged us to even continue on this one. But we did go up to sort of like middle center south of Sweden. There's this little town where they have the headquarters of the biggest, I think it's the world's biggest sports retailer, or at least it used to be Intersport, huge in Europe. And we were having our presentation for the upcoming season. And so we presented a range of skis and boots and bindings and snowboards and everything like that. And at the end, one of the head honchos at Intersport said, "But okay, I'd like to have a discussion, a little sidebar with you two," pointing to me and my boss at the time. And so, okay, sure. So we sat down, and he said, we love Salomon, and your product is great, but that ad campaign that you guys have launched, we hate it, and you need to stop it, or we're basically not going to do business with you anymore. And I was like, why? Well, because it's sacrilegious. Oh, okay. And I looked at Krilla, and Krilla looked at me, and he said to this guy, he said, "No, we're not going to do that. We're going to continue because it is working, and it's irony, and it's fun, and there's nothing wrong with the campaign." And he backed me up. He stood up, and
wow.
And it was, I was young, and I obviously I got really nervous, thinking, what have I done? What are the consequences going to be of all this stuff? But he was as courageous as I was, if not even more, actually. And I will never forget that, like the courage that he showed, because he knew that he could probably lose a lot of business.
Wow. So what did happen with Intersport?
No, nothing.
It's like you called their bluff.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably what it was. We continued doing business as normal. In fact, I think we grew our business quite significantly. Probably not due to the ad campaign per se, but the revolution that happened in skiing.
Yeah.
So that was the first thing we did. And then we just followed up. We said, okay, now we got to go and bury these skis. So we took one, classical Swedish Thule roof boxes, placed it at this cemetery, right, an open hole, and then sort of the Thule box lying right above sort of the dugout grave, and then surrounded by skis that were basically just stuck into the ground, which were the new young members of the family. And then an obituary, obviously, that was rhyming and really fun. And then we continued, and we just made fun of everything. And to this day, it's like, it's one of the first things that I did. And I've been involved in a lot of amazing brands and marketing campaigns and whatnot, but it's the one thing that I probably remember the most, and it's because it was so important that it happened early in my career. It showed me the path forward, to not be afraid, to rely on your intuition and be courageous, right? So yeah. It's a long time ago, but it still is very meaningful.
Yeah. There's a few risks that you took in that campaign. Obviously, the ones that are really obvious, like dealing with a controversial kind of subject matter that could get people riled up. And as you mentioned, in this day and age, who knows, Salomon could have gotten temporarily canceled just for dealing with the idea of suicide. But I think the real risk in that day and age was that it sounds like in that first ad, at least, you weren't even showing the product. Is that true?
Yes. In fact, we showed a competitor's product.
Yeah. We know that Intersport pushed back, but what was the journey like trying to sell that through internally?
It actually wasn't as difficult as you may think. Salomon in general is a company that at least used to be full of risk takers, innovators, creators, imaginative people. It's never been the conservative side of anything. It has always challenged the norms. So that spirit, even though we were actually at the time owned by Adidas, so part of a bigger company that was publicly traded. Luckily enough, Salomon was small enough to be hidden somewhere in the margins. But I think, the atmosphere at Salomon Sweden was one of rebels, risk takers, doing things differently. So when I presented this, they were like, oh yeah, sure, absolutely. Shouldn't we go even further? Our sales reps were over the moon happy with something that they could go to their key accounts and say, check this out, what we're going to do this winter. So it wasn't very difficult to sell in, actually.
Yeah. I mean, obviously HQ wasn't super mad about it because they ended up bringing you on and moving you to France eventually too.
Yeah.
It's just wild. When you look back on that, I mean, it sounds like it still is such a clear marker in your career. What do you think are the lessons that you took from that experience? And what do you think are the takeaways for marketers today from that campaign?
I mean, honestly, the biggest lesson is to, have courage, be youthful, tap into your intuition, right? Today, with everything is measurable. The digitalization of marketing has led us to a space where very little risk is ever taken, and you steer away from a marketing program that isn't directly measurable, which is leading us all down sort of this path of uniformication. Everything is looking the same, feeling the same. With the introduction of AI right now, then, obviously large language models have to learn from something and somewhere. So it's going to learn from what is existing out there and it's going to spit out something that is a mix of all those things. And the original creativity, the risk taking and the courage has sort of been put to the side a little bit. And I'm putting myself in that bucket, quite frankly, because I'm part of this too, and I'm using all the digital tools, and I'm trying to become AI native and all that stuff. But I wish we would have a little bit less everything being connected and everything being measurable.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like, heck, I'm sitting in front of this screen, and now I'm going to try to be creative, and it is just so not conducive to creativity at all, because all I'm looking at is what others are doing.
Yeah. The measure of success is did it match what the algorithm wanted? Did you use the same trending TikTok song that everyone else used because it's going to get you views? I listened this past weekend. I listened to the really fantastic Ezra Klein interview with Brian Eno. Highly recommend if you haven't listened to it. And I keep talking about this idea that he brought up, that brought up around AI, and he compared it to when you're watercolor painting. You're dipping in a color and you're painting, and then you're dipping in water, and then a different color and dipping in water, and eventually that water, without fail, it always is going to become like a brown and purple color. And he calls that color munge color. And that's sort of AI. We're all dipping from the same pot when we're creating AI. And so everything's going to look the same, and it's going to look like blah, brown and purple. And because everything's so measurable, there's no incentive to take those massive risks. No. If that campaign that you done had floundered, they would have said, well, you should have just followed the path that everyone else was following nowadays. But back then you could really step out.
It's a beautiful analogy by Brian Eno, that everything turns brown. I mean, not beautiful, but actually quite ugly, but very well done. I fully agree. Fully agree. That's well said.
Yeah.
So turn off your devices and be a human being. Because at the end of the day, a brand is nothing but an accumulation of associations in the minds of the people that we're talking to. We don't own that. We think we do, but we don't. So we need to feed that narrative over and over again and infuse more stories into it. So yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense, but
It does.
I'm trying to convince myself to do more of it.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot lately about where the best creative ideas come from. And if we go back to that moment when you guys had that flash of genius around kind of killing the old skis, correct me if I'm wrong, I bet it came from sitting in a room without computers, just like an uninterrupted couple of hours of brainstorming, of throwing things on a whiteboard, of scribbling things in your notebooks. And I don't see people ideating that much like that anymore. So I'm thinking a lot about how I can create that atmosphere on my team of just like analog creative experience. We had a team day yesterday and we threw pottery on wheels for the first time for a lot of us. And I'm thinking about getting some paints and pastels for the team so that when ideation happens, we're stepping away from the computers and not depending on what AI is going to recommend. Are you kind of picking up any practices to keep those creative muscles from atrophying?
Honestly, Amanda, I'm struggling, and I'm struggling because Shibumi, as great as it is to work remotely, we don't even have an office. Everybody that works for Shibumi works from home, sitting by themselves in front of their computer at any place of the US. So getting together is hard. Getting together is basically getting together at a digital meeting, at a Zoom meeting or something like that. I'm not, I may see your face here, Amanda, but I'm not, I don't know what you're thinking. I can't say much more than what the screen is saying. Like it is almost impossible, I feel like, to come up with any original creative ideas like this. It has to happen. So then so what happens is that now you have to get together a couple of times per year and, which is great. And you do your offsite and all that stuff. And now you have to cram everything in to that little period of time. Whereas creativity does not come, pre-ordered.
No.
It happens when you don't even think about it, right? When you're doing all those other things that you probably shouldn't be doing at work, but that's when the idea comes, and it comes together with somebody somewhere, I don't know, having a coffee or walking or eating or doing something together. But I have always found it really difficult to be creative when you're supposed to be, because that's the time you have. And now we're here together and it has to happen. So I really don't have the solution. Somebody tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, there is something about the energy that comes from being in a room or in a space together, or the conversations that you overhear that sparks a moment or a tagline that then breeds a whole campaign. There is something special about it. We're really trying to capture the balance of focused alone time to be creative, but also time together to have those sparks from bumping up against each other. Yeah.
And what's interesting is that the little agency that I work with, they don't exist any longer as an agency, but the name of the agency was Tennis Anyone, as a question. And that's a crazy name for any company to begin with. Maybe a little less crazy in the creative space, but what it really implied was we can't do this alone. We got to do it together, and I need a partner, and let's be partners together. Let's play tennis. Let's bounce that ball back and forth. And that's exactly how they worked. It was small, it was classical setup, one copywriter, one art director, and then, a product manager, and then me as the client, very, very small groups of people. Yeah. Frederick and Daniel were the names. If they ever hear this, I want to thank you guys, because obviously one of the more meaningful things that I've done in now a pretty long career.
Yeah. You got to do something else really significant when you were at Salomon. Once you ended up in France at the HQ in Annecy, I think a lot of big things happened. You met your wife, but on the work front, something really significant that happened, which I think comes back to this idea of getting people in a room together and having that creative energy, is you got to help reposition the brand. Can you tell me about that experience?
Yeah. And I don't know if the actual word is to reposition or just find the truth. You know, I don't know how to express that, you know, or to
that's the best repositioning is when it's actually getting to the core.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, exactly. Right. You know, it wasn't really moving the goalpost into a space that we haven't been in. It was the other way around. But so I moved to Annecy, France, in the heart of the French Alps, where Salomon HQ is, and still today, in sort of 2003 or something like that. And I came in at one of the most creative periods of time. At the time, the president of Salomon was Jean-Luc Diard, who, I don't know if you've heard of his name, and if you haven't, then you'll know of the brand that he created later on afterwards called Hoka.
Small brand.
Yeah, just this tiny little thing that is not so tiny any longer. But Jean-Luc ran the brand, and he loved product, and he loved marketing, and he loved product marketing, and he loved all of those things. And he had a whole sort of research center called the Advanced Research Center, like 30 people that were tasked to do research and to figure out stuff wherever they wanted to do it in.
This is within the brand?
Yeah, within the Salomon brand. Like, okay, you want to invent a squirrel suit, sure, go ahead and do it, and then, you know, go and test it, come back on Monday alive. Or, you know, all kinds of crazy innovation happened. And he was promoting that sort of creative, innovative nature deeply. And it was everywhere. And I joined the company at the time, and Salomon had, you know, yes, we came from Winter Sports Equipment. And, you know, yes, at one point we had made a turn to hiking footwear and then inline skate. And at one point we were even in surfing, making hollow surfboards under the sub-brand called Escor.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it was cool, man. It was cool. You know, the day when they told us that Kelly Slater had test-ridden one of our boards and thought it was amazing. Nothing was out of reach or realm at the time. And that's when I joined. And I mean, it was an incredibly interesting period of time. And then Adidas sold Salomon to Amer. And a lot of the OG people left the company. Overnight, basically, Amer's revenue doubled, right? Because of the entrance of Salomon into the group. And all eyes were on Salomon. And, you know, we had to be way more rigid than we've ever been before. Every cost was analyzed. You know, Advanced Research Center was shut down. And we were supposed to do marketing according to a Procter & Gamble fast-moving consumer goods, you know, style, which was really important for me because I learned a ton from that time as well. And after a couple of years, somehow I slipped on a piece of banana peel again, and I had the opportunity to lead sort of the overarching brand from Salomon, all categories and products and sports included. And we were certainly going through a ginormous identity crisis. You know, we had so many product categories, but within every product category, there were, you know, 2, 3, 4, 5 different subcultures. You know, just take skiing is not a uniform thing that is practiced the same way. Wherever you go on the planet. If you're in Austria, it is going to primarily be driven by ski racing culture. If you come to the west coast of Canada or the west coast of the US, it's going to be free ski driven. If you go to the east coast of those two countries, it's going to be more ski racing. And you go to Japan, all of a sudden you'll see skiing being driven by like demo skiing, people doing perfect turns. And, only there is a wide spectra of opinions about how you should position yourself. And you add on to that apparel and footwear and, all these other subcategories that we had, and you will have a hotbed of opinions about what Salomon as a brand should be and how it should be positioned. And that's when I entered the Swede, politically neutral, obviously, and trying to unify this thing. So, with strong-willed French people, big, loud Americans, and technically engineered-minded Germanic people, and so on goes the list, right? And I figured that I needed help. I needed help from somebody on the outside that can bring on a point of view and a way to kind of examine and dig out the truths about the brand. And I ran into this guy, Bob Sheard, who was running a small brand style agency out of London. And we'd met a few times, and he's been pitching his business, and now it was time to do something. So I called Bob and I said, I think I need your help. And it's like, sure, no problem. We're going to do a 3-day workshop, and we're going to do it in Chamonix, which is close to your head office. And we're going to gather, as many stakeholders with, mostly divergent opinions about what we should be and shouldn't be. So I made a list, and I think it came down to something like 14 people that were flown in from everywhere, USA, and people that represented the different product categories within HQ. And we sat down, and Bob led us through this process of imagining the brand outside of its space. Imagine Salomon as an automotive brand. Would you be a Fiat or a Porsche or a Volvo? And, people have associations with automotive brands, and people have associations with fashion brands and consumer electronics and stuff like that. And by taking us out of our space, you start forcing out what people actually think and believe. And what was put in front of me was mind-blowing. I knew that we had divergent opinions about what we should be, but it was chaotic. We had people that said, we should be, I remember this is 2007, I believe, right? This is the height of action sports surf brands. Quicksilver was ruling the game, a Roxy for women, and the people from the apparel department, they were dead set that we should be Quicksilver in terms of how we came across and looked and felt like, and how we spoke for men, and then we should be Roxy for women. And then, you just continued through the group of people and the categories of product, and everything was completely non-coherent. But I don't think anybody kind of realized what happened during those 3 days, because of all the discussions and all the little things that were said in between, and the associations to different brands outside of our space. All of a sudden, there was some kind of puzzle being laid in front of us. And Bob did it masterfully. And then, we had gone through 2 days, and it was time to unite ourselves. And I had lost all hope, basically. I was like, how are we going to unify this thing? And Bob stayed up overnight with a couple of his people. And in the morning, he stood up in front of everybody, and he just basically started laying down the law in a very dry British way. This is what I've heard, is how he put it. You over there, you would like this to be a lifestyle brand. And then he started pulling on his t-shirt with, I can't remember which logo it was. And he said, this is lifestyle. Okay. You're not lifestyle. In fact, you have more patents to date than NASA has filed. Okay.
Wow.
Do you think that's lifestyle? no, you are an innovation machine. And he just kept going like that and just debunking things and debunking and just laying it out, boom, one after another one. And he just said, in fact, it's very simple. What you do here is mountain sports innovation for mountain sports people. You in footwear, you in alpine skiing, you in snowboarding, you in apparel. That's what you all do. And that's what unifies you. And he did it in a way that it just silenced the whole room just went quiet. And I was like, holy, I've never seen anything like this. And I mean, for me, it was one of the biggest lessons that I've ever had. And I've used this same manner for, I don't know, 10, 15 brands later on by, as I say, forcing out the truth through a process of peeling the onion, right? You peel one layer, another layer, until you will eventually get somewhere close to some form of core truth. Or I think Bob said, like, this is sort of like the house that used to be beautiful 100 years ago because it had an intent, it had an original design idea, it had architecture, and all of those things are now hidden 100 years because there's been multiple families that had bought the place, lived in it. Somebody changed the siding, another one put a pool in front of it, a third one, rebuilt all the hardscaping and landscaping in front of it. The house is still there, but it's hidden. We just need to take these different layers away and get rid of them until you get to the core of things. And I think it's a very telling part of the process that I now use all the time, basically.
So for Salomon, what was the impact on the brand of that kind of crystallization?
The impact was primarily we have to focus our attention on something, which led me down to a strategy on how to sort of like execute that from a brand voice and also from a brand strategy and marketing strategy standpoint. So we, with all these different sports and categories and subcultures and nationalities and geographies, we said, we're going to do two things. Number one, in 2007, we're going to lean heavily into trail running.
We all know where that got you.
Exactly. Yeah. Looking back now, I don't think we had any idea what we decided on and where we embarked. In 2007, there were some, weirdos, crazy people running around and, in forests somewhere, half naked with long hair and whatnot, or way up in lost mountains in the Pyrenees. But, most people were like, yeah, whatever. But we're like, no, really. That's what we're going to do. We're going to do a ton of trail running. We're going to build the sport from the inside and out, and we're going to innovate on a product level. And the other part is we're going to be all about free skiing. And those are the two things that we're going to market, talk about, and get behind. So it led us to we're doing mountain sports innovation for mountain sports people, and we're going to do it through the lens of trail running and free skiing. And that's what we did for, until I left, which is done in 2013. And today, I think, people that have equity and shares in Salomon or in Amer are pretty happy that decision was made. I mean, it's crown jewel really of, together with Arc'teryx, it's the two crown jewels of the Amer sport portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah. And as a trail runner, one of those people who runs around in the mountains half naked, Salomon is the flagship brand for many of us. Like, that is, when you think of a hydration vest, it's probably a Salomon hydration vest that you're thinking about. When you think of like a heavy lug trail shoe, it's probably a Salomon shoe that you're thinking of. And then they had the good fortune of the Gorpcore trend, also driven by Arc'teryx, making that shoe a city shoe a few years ago as well, which is, who could have known?
Yeah, lots of things needs to happen, right, for things to come together, right? Culture has to align, which it did. But then you have to have people that are, at the helm when that happens and understand the significance of what is happening and then align and go with that one. And that's, I think, I mean, like Salomon's been fortunate enough to have incredible people working there. And they have incredible people working there today. I'm looking at that and going, damn, that is well done. I really like what you did. And it's a good friend of mine, by the way, who today is the global chief brand officer, Scott Mellin, who runs the brand, and what he's done, by bringing innovation to the forefront and building this brand right in the intersection of performance and culture is really well done. And overall, hats off to the amazing team and the amazing people at Salomon.
Yeah. What I'm hearing, that decision to get hyper focused probably meant dropping a lot of things that the team had invested energy and innovation and money into. That's another risk. There's a theme of risk taking through your time at Salomon. Maybe transitioning a little bit, when you look out at the marketplace today, do you see anyone taking the kind of risks that you admire? Is there anyone that you think is doing a really good job doing kind of risky campaigns?
Yeah, or just risky. I don't know. I'm keeping a keen eye on the athletic sports market and the outdoor market in general. And there's some brands that have been doing really good work lately. I mean, obviously you're looking at the Ons and the Hokas of the world that have just completely exploded in a space that 15 years ago, if somebody said, we're going to launch a running footwear brand, most people would just laugh at you and say, are you absolutely nuts? There is no space for another running footwear brand. There's already Nike and Adidas and New Balance and Asics and Saucony, and like there's a ton of that. We don't need anything. There's no need for any brand. Well, apparently there was, because the little niche that Hoka and On, I'm doing quotation marks, obviously was big enough to, be incredibly significant. And it doesn't end there, right? You've got little, smaller challenger brand, one from where you come from, Norda, that has been doing things very differently from a design perspective, obviously leaning heavily into trail running, but feeling so different. You've got a Parisian brand in Satisfy that I just adore what they're doing, really cool little things. When everybody else is pouring millions into activations at the UTMB, Satisfy turns a little Fiat Panda into a really cool vehicle and has that, and everybody photographs it and puts it on their gram. Like there's a lot of creativity going on. I think what Salomon is doing right now is also incredibly well done. And then, I live literally 10 minutes away from the Eager Beavers, the Nike headquarters, and it's a very meaningful brand that lost its path, right? Mm-hmm. Heavily so, that are trying to turn that incredible ship around. And I get very encouraged when I see things like the latest Why Do It spin on Just Do It campaign. I think it's Tyler, the Creator, that is the VO, right? And I was like, yes, I think Nike's back. I hope this is how the rest of that ginormous campus is acting, and that they're feeling the energy, that they're feeling like they're back again. And I get encouraged to see, because we need Nike. Honestly, we all need Nike to do amazing, crazy, cool things out there. And I really root for them to find its, path back. But they've got a runway. They neglected everything that made them great, quite frankly, for a long period of time. And, Amanda, it takes not that long to destroy something, and it takes a very long time to build and rebuild something. And I think they are in the rebuild phase. But
yeah, on the day that we're recording this, we just had an episode go live with a woman named Julie Igarashi, who lives near you in Portland, who was a VP CD for women's at Nike. And she talks a lot about that journey back. So good reference for anyone that wants to understand a little bit about the journey that Nike's been on. Have you crossed paths with Julie?
No, I have not. This remains one of the biggest mysteries that I have. Like, I live right where the HQ is. And if I meet somebody that works at Nike and I say, do you know that person? Like in 9 cases out of 10, there will be like, no, never heard of. No, don't
It's
know
just
who that is.
massive. I was on campus last week. It's huge.
And I think very siloed too, which is, I guess, unavoidable when you become so huge that you have thousands of people that work just in one building. You have to organize yourself in some form or fashion. So I understand it.
Yeah. Okay, Niclas, there's a question that I always love to ask everyone before we wrap up, which is, what is the best piece of brand or marketing advice that you've ever been given?
Yeah, and I'll keep this very simple. Look for the truth in the brand and then amplify the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Simple, but true.
Yes, and hard.
Yeah.
Much harder than you think. You got to distill down and get rid of all the annoying little things that are standing in the way, that are shading what is the honest truth in your brand. But when you get it, you need to lean heavily into that one and amplify it over and over again. And that doesn't mean repeating the same thing. It just means telling the same style narrative from many different angles. Awesome.
What's the best place for people to find you online if they want to follow what you're up to?
Well, I'm not very good at posting stuff in general, but if I do, I'll probably put a little blurb on LinkedIn. And yeah, please reach out, but do it in a heartfelt way and don't just try to sell me something immediately, because sadly LinkedIn has turned into something that I don't think was the intent from the beginning. It's just a B2B sales platform to much degree today.
Yeah, there's some good if you dig in there. You have to get past all the cold outreach to find the real nuggets in there. Awesome. Yes. Well, Niclas, I truly enjoyed talking to you. Thanks for sharing your stories. Can't wait till we get to do this again.